It's been 10 years.
Now, I heard that eventually the Ultimate books were going to replace Marvel Universe.
Any day now.
Isn't that next year? Next year.
Any day now.
It's been 10 years, though.
No, but
It's going to happen.
it could happen, and that's really you have to watch out for.
It's going to break the Marvel Universe.
It just doesn't seem feasible that would be...
No, it's going to happen.
That's why they did it.
They've been seeding it for 10 years so that you're ready. You're just ready for it.
That's why.
None of the other books are even around anymore.
No. You don't understand. It's going to happen. They've been laying the ground for 10 years, and all of a sudden, yank.
The guy who started it's not even there.
No.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen.
You're crazy.
These are going to ruin comics. This episode of iFanboy is sponsored by GameFly and Squarespace.
Sup? Welcome to iFanboy. Trying to get the youth market.
Yeah.
Yo.
See what I did?
Yeah.
Oh,
We're
this is
skewing younger.
This is
Extreme. This is Ultimate iFanboy.
Ultimate iFanboy. That's what we should have done.
Yeah.
Well, iFanboy is a comic book discussion show from the website ifanboy.com. I am Josh Flanagan, extreme alternate universe guy.
And I am Ultimate Ron Richards.
And I am Connor Kilpatrick. Hey kids, let's talk for a minute.
Let's rap.
Way back in the late 90s, Marvel's coming out of bankruptcy. Things are starting to get good again. And they decide that with their biggest, most popular character, Spider-Man, maybe
They had a problem.
they had a problem.
They said maybe there's too much.
Maybe 30 years of continuity is too much of a barrier for the kids.
A kid in 1999 just jump on and start reading Spider-Man? And the answer was no.
Well, he'd been cloned.
Really, there was the Spider-Man, one of the most iconic Marvel characters. They felt as if with
Characters
all,
in general, yeah.
he's married, he's
older, he's in his 30s,
he had a baby.
Yeah.
Looked awful in an armor costume, so
Yeah,
that
Exactly.
wouldn't work.
So how do you pull people into
Well,
Spider-Man?
they're basically restarting the company at that point, right?
Right,
So
yeah,
they're trying to
exactly.
make it more accessible to lots of people, because at that point, the readership went like this.
So how do you jump on a Spider-Man? Who do you turn to jump to get people to jump on a Spider-Man?
John Byrne.
One of the greatest comic creators of all time.
In the 80s.
In the 80s. Let's go to John Byrne. Let's give him a title like Spider-Man Chapter 1, and let's
start it.
retell the origin.
Yeah.
Now, let me take you back to this time period. I had been out of comic books for a while, and I was coming back. And I hear, hey, this guy John Byrne is going to tell Spider-Man for the beginning, and I think, I love John
Sign
Byrne.
me up. He did it with Superman in '86.
West Coast Avengers.
West Coast
Fantastic
Avengers.
Four.
Fantastic Four.
She-Hulk.
X-Men.
Yes.
Yeah.
John Byrne is
What
as
could
good
go
a guy
wrong?
in comics as anybody
Who was in
else.
touch with the youth of America?
Who?
A man in his late 40s, early 50s. That's
In the suburbs of Connecticut.
Yes.
So I pick up my issue, and it looks something like this. It was awful.
It was pretty bad.
It was really awful. Spider-Man Chapter 1, instead of rebooting it to now, they rebooted it to then.
He just redid what Stanley and Steve Ditko did.
Peter Parker in a sweater vest and just
it was
goofy.
not
Round glass. I think I read one issue and just went, ugh.
It was too reverential to that which had come before.
That's not a reboot. That's just a retelling.
rehash.
Yes.
So Spider-Man Chapter 1 really signifies the end of the bankruptcy down
Harris
period,
years.
Bob Harris years of Marvel. And rightfully so, the new era, the 2000s of Spider-Man, as led by crazy man Bill Jemas, who was the head of Marvel, and the newly minted editor-in-chief Joe Quesada, coming off the great work on Marvel
That
Knights.
guy's going places.
Yeah, exactly. They decide, what we're going to do is we're going to create a new universe. It's going to be the Ultimate Universe.
What number does that one have?
I don't know. And these are going to be new comics with our classic characters.
Free of the baggage of decades of continuity.
X-Men, Fantastic Four, Avengers, and our keystone Spider-Man. That's going to be the first one, and it's going to be called Ultimate Spider-Man. And this was the first image we saw of it, and I threw up. Because it was like computery, and it was no good.
That logo is bad.
But for some reason, they took a risk.
Yep.
They hired a young, I don't know if he's young, but a seasoned indie comic creator, Brian Michael Bendis, who before this had been doing Powers and Image and Jinx and Goldfish and Sam and Twitch for McFarlane.
He had a little heat on him, but
he had a
he's
little
not
heat,
the
but he was-
powerhouse you know today.
He
Right.
had indie heat. which is where they come from.
And he had been sending his stuff to Marvel because, as we know now, Bendis has a great love for Marvel. At the time, his buddy David Mack was doing work with Quesada on Daredevil, and was trying to slip him his stuff to Quesada, going, "Hey, check out my buddy, check out Brian Bendis." And he was submitting his work where he was writing and drawing, and Quesada very quickly said, "You're not an artist," but saw something in his writing, and for some reason they gave him the writing duties of Ultimate Spider-Man.
Well, in addition, Jemis worked with him to plot the whole story up.
Exactly.
Yes. Originally, he had the whole Ultimate universe. He was going to do X-Men as well, but then that didn't work out, so they brought in Mark Miller to do that.
So a risky proposition, a new universe, a new title. They went to Mark Bagley, who was an industry vet who
Plus, he was a veteran of Spider-Man. Yeah. He did Amazing Spider-Man.
He did Amazing Spider-Man. He did Thunderbolts. He did New Warriors. Yeah. He was, in
the time that he explained that, he could have drawn an entire issue.
Exactly. So in October of 2000, starting off the decade, nearly 10 years ago, a little less than 10 years ago now, Ultimate Spider-Man #1 came out, and the internet broke in half.
It was not a very strong
internet. The nascent internet broke in half.
Yeah.
People freaked the fuck out.
They totally did. They freaked out.
People were convinced that this new Ultimate... The plan, the secret agenda of Jemis and Quesada was to jettison the current, or the long-time continuity, replace it with the Ultimate continuity, and people flipped because their long-loved stories were going to disappear.
And then nothing was going to matter. The past 30 years of Reed Spider-Man doesn't matter. Now he's a kid again, and now it's like it's all edgy, and it's the way kids talk. And
they had no idea what they were going to do later.
Right. That's a very good point. But and then the other thing.
Wait a minute! It was their plan. They pulled it off.
The other thing that freaked everybody out was here. This is the first volume, Power and Responsibility, Volume 1. This collects the first 6 issues. Yep. And so the original Spider-Man origin in Amazing Fantasy 15 was done by Stan Lee and Steve Ditko, and it took them about 15 pages to tell getting his powers, the wrestling thing, Uncle Ben dying, becoming Spider-Man.
Well, it was all really one panel. Yeah. And that was Stan Lee and Jack Kirby's genius.
Yeah, exactly. Or Steve Ditko.
Right, you know what I'm saying. With the style. The Marvel style of the 60s.
So 15 pages. What took them 15 pages took Brian Bendis and Mark Bagley 6 issues to do. Spider-Man doesn't appear in costume until the 6th issue.
Well, the 5th, and then the full costume in the 6th. But he's not in costume
at all. So for 6 months, we read a very long, decompressed story of Peter Parker.
It like that.
It's not bad at all.
That's the thing. That's the thing.
Well, the idea is that Bendis wanted to build this world up before tearing it down. He wanted you to get to know Uncle Ben before killing him. He wanted you to feel the pain that Peter felt.
Yeah.
And not just have him be dead in the past, kind of like Bruce Wayne's parents. You never knew them, so you don't really feel their pain. But
you want somebody to connect with,
he wanted you to be upset when Ben died, and it was a different choice. People freaked out about that. I think people were just freaking out about everything because they were freaked out about it.
And it was the millennium. It was the
Y2K was in everybody's mind at that point.
But once
my watch might try to kill me.
But once you settle down from the freak out and you realize that this is really good comics. Yeah. And Bendis and Bagley then created something that went on for 120 some odd issues of really some of the best stories consistently. This is probably the most consistent run of comics this decade.
In my life,
in our lives, yeah. At least for Marvel, also for I throw in DC and
anybody,
anybody.
The most consistent run from anybody in terms of superhero comics.
See, all the odds were against them. It was a crazy idea, and they made some good stuff. It's amazing.
We're going to talk about some of that stuff after we come back from this.
GameFly is the largest online video game rental service and offers you a choice from over 7,000 new classic titles across all consoles and handhelds. With plans starting at $15.95 a month, GameFly members can rent 1 to 4 games at a time and keep them as long as they like. There are no late fees, no due dates, and shipping is always free. Once you're done playing a game, send it back and GameFly will send you the next available game on your list. If you really like the game you're playing, simply click Keep It on the GameFly website and the game is yours at a discounted price. GameFly will even mail you the case and manuals free of charge. iFanboy fans get a 2-week free trial when they go to www.gamefly.com/iFanboy. Some restrictions apply. See the website for details.
The first arc. Now, the first arc is the origin story. We all know the origin story. It's
bit by spider, wrestling, Ben die,
his uncle dies.
Power responsibility.
He realizes he should have stopped the guy. Right. It's all the classic elements are there, but it's told over a longer period of time. We're introduced into this world where, and it's sustained for 10 years. Peter has a ridiculous haircut.
Mm-hmm. Looks like a girl.
It's not written by a kid, but it's more it's younger skewing. So even though the dialogue is more kid-like and more quote unquote edgy, it's still kind of goofy. But it feels more it felt more contemporary than Amazing Spider-Man did at the time.
It felt more. It felt more of
Yeah.
now, and it really feels more of now than Spider-Man does. Although very recently Spider-Man's turned it around, but this is a different kind of feeling. The idea of
I think they're trying to get Amazing Spider-Man to replace Ultimate Spider-Man.
Well, I remember this started around when iFanboy started.
Yep.
So we've basically the life of our iFanboy has been the life of this book, and we in the beginning we said this is the Spider-Man book.
Yeah.
If you're talking about a flagship book at Marvel, it's this. It's not Amazing Spider-Man. It's not Spectacular Spider-Man. It's not even Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man or Web Spider-Man. Any other ones?
Spectacular. You said
Spectacular
that,
Spider-Man,
Adjectiveless.
or Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man.
Peter Parker
Adjectiveless
Spider-Man.
Peter Parker
Marvel
Spider-Man.
team up featuring Spider-Man.
Yes. It's none of those things. This was the flagship Spider-Man book for years.
What I think is so interesting about this is that Bendis is known to be a very talky writer. There's a lot of the jabbering going on, and this book had a lot of action, but it was balanced with that Bendis style relationship talking.
David Mamet-esque
Exactly.
dialogue.
And as best evidenced in probably issue 13, which was the issue where Peter tells Mary Jane that he is Spider-Man and reveals his identity, and they also decide to become boyfriend-girlfriend. That issue was just them talking.
That was one of the best issues. I think maybe the high point of the series is literally issue 13.
13th issue.
Well, no, really. I mean, it really was.
They peaked early.
Yeah.
It was the entire story was in Peter's bedroom with them just chatting, and there was a lot of emotion and dynamic action, even though there was no action, because there was a lot of just how they speak to how he reveals his secrets, how they're going to reveal their feelings. There's a lot of really close-up panels.
Yeah.
And then there's a lot of he really Bagley controls the action in here. It's just how do you make a conversation interesting? Well, you get real close for the really dramatic parts, you pull out for the thing, and you come in real here for the.
Okay.
But it's interesting because up to this point, Bagley, like we said, Bagley's been an industry vet, and he's done Thunderbolts, and he had done some Spider-Man stuff, but doing very superhero stuff. It had to have been interesting, and Bagley became, I think, a better artist by working with Bendis, by really working with pace and expressions, and
One of the things about this is that because it's the same people on it for such a long time.
Yep.
We used to use the word consistent before, but really, like you never read an issue that like that didn't look right, or that doesn't,
or the
that
characters
doesn't-
were wrong.
Yeah, there was no wrong writing because it was the same people behind them all the time, and all it served to do was to build up these characters in a very straight line. And Bendis never, ever, ever lost track of who any of these characters were.
Yep.
Well, it's funny because we talk about all the time in comics how there's no consistency because people come and go. 3 issues, a new writer, team leaves, new artist.
Yeah.
This has been not just Bendis and Bagley for 10 years, but it's been Bendis for 120, however many
Plus,
issues right now.
yeah.
This is the model of consistency.
Yeah.
You don't get this. This doesn't happen in comics anymore.
And
This doesn't happen by any, Jeff Johns would be the closest, but he stays on for 5 years. This is 10 years.
Yeah. And what's interesting is that while Ultimate Spider-Man's been running for these 10 years, the Ultimate Universe has kind of been crumbling around it. Ultimate X-Men my mind was a failure. Ultimate Fantastic Four had points, but then really didn't
never
stay
took
consistent.
off.
Ultimates say what you will, but
Ultimates were a couple of good stories, but it was not a long, sustained run.
Definitely the heyday of the Ultimate Universe was in the early part of the.
True. But what I find the most interesting is that Ultimate Spider-Man existed in that universe, but that universe never the weight of it was never put on the shoulders of this title.
Yeah.
So for example, like the Ultimates appear in this title, Nick Fury appears in this title, other people appear in this
They all
title.
appear in the
They
title.
interact, but it's always with a purpose. In fact, Peter Parker has this a very interesting, in my mind, relationship with Nick Fury, where Nick Fury knows that Peter Parker is Spider-Man. Like the Shield knows that he is, but there's this interesting kind of respect given.
He wants to see what's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. They're keeping an eye on him. They come in when he needs some help, or he helps them, or stuff like that. And that's led to some great situations. It's led to, even when Nick Fury wasn't in the universe, when Danvers was the head of S.H.I.E.L.D., when Carol Danvers was, and remember with the big gun?
Yeah.
So, interesting relationship there. Also, Kitty Pryde from the X-Men.
Well, I lied before. The high point wasn't 13, it was Kitty Pryde.
Ultimate Spider-Man Annual #1, when Kitty Pryde and Peter Parker begin dating. For me, as an X-Men fan, like Kitty Pryde, one of my favorite X-Men characters, is in Ultimate Spider-Man as a consistent character. Yes, she's an X-Man, but it works. Like how he did it, I don't know.
It worked because we're trained from years of reading comics to think this thing that happens will go away.
Yeah.
So I know reading it, I thought, great, they've got this great chemistry. They really work together. It's never going to last because he can't date. He's not allowed to date Kitty Pryde. She can't stay in his book. She's an X-Men character, and she did.
Yeah.
She stayed. She was his girlfriend, and that doesn't happen in regular comics. It can't allow it to happen. But here, Bendis has complete control of the world, so he can do whatever he wants with anybody.
But it's interesting is that this is a new universe starting from scratch, but it pulled in things from the 30 years of continuity that they didn't talk about. And the term that we kind of throw around is ultimatizing.
Yeah.
In that
Ultimization.
ultimization of that, taking this rich library of characters, Spider-Man, Green Goblin, Kingpin, Daredevil, Vulture, Electro,
Mysterio, Rhino, Sandman, everyone.
and do a new spin on them. Sometimes, if anything, any criticism of the book is that while it was doing something new and blazing, it was still kind of relying on the past.
A little bit, but the thing was, if you look at, Robert Kirkman, one of my favorite writers, when he ultimized people in X-Men, they were basically the same thing.
Yeah.
The credit that you've got to give to Bendis here through this is that when they changed a character, they changed a character for the most part.
Yeah.
There's a lot of examples you can go through here. Right away, I think it probably threw a lot of people for a loop when the Green Goblin showed up, and it was a radically different thing. I mean, not completely. Norman Osborn was fairly the same.
Yeah, but it was fairly menacing. He was this really became a monster. Yeah, it was more Hulk-like.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, even recently we've seen Mysterio, and he's very different from what we've been used to.
I liked that Kraven was like a TV
reality
show hunter.
You know, there's always been a relationship between Daredevil and Spider-Man in the comics, in the regular Marvel Universe comics. In this one, it's a very different relationship, and Daredevil's an asshole.
Yeah.
And he doesn't like
but he thought this is an annoying kid.
Right.
He didn't really like it.
And I like that.
Or when he did the little Marvel Knights storyline, and they had the little team, and they brought in Moon Knight, and they did Ultimate Moon Knight, but he was way more interesting than Moon Knight was at the time. I mean, it was like this, taking all the best parts of the multiple personalities.
I also liked when Black Cat showed up, and he starts the flirtation. She kisses him, and she sees he's a kid. She vomits.
Yeah.
That's a play on what happened before, and how successful it was varied from character to character, but it still felt fresh throughout the whole 10 years.
And it would take other, major story points in Spider-Man's history, I think, as a way to kind of, keep us comfortable as longtime readers, but also things that are recognizable, like introduced Venom, introduced Eddie Brock and Venom, but added a different dimension in that Venom was the byproduct of what Peter and Eddie Brock's father were working on, as they were scientists and stuff like that.
It was supposed to be a medical cure
for cancer, wasn't it?
Yeah, and it kinded of worked.
Yeah, except that turns them crazy. Yeah. So it took away the alien symbiote part, but added in this.
What was that a word?
Symbiote, whatever.
I thought Symbiote was a ninja movie from
Kumite.
the 80s.
It's Kumite.
But the whole Venom storyline led directly to Bendis' attempt to do the Clone Saga.
Which, by the way, just hats off to the cojones to throw that one out there.
Yeah, and part of it was I think there's a little of ego in there, like, I'm going to do the Clone Saga. I can do it right.
Well, he did do it better.
He did do it better.
Well, yeah.
Yeah.
That's for me the low point. That's when the 6 months I really wasn't enjoying reading Spider-Man was that. But that was
6 months over the course.
Exactly,
of 10 years.
6 months out of 120 plus issues.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good track record.
Yeah. And we got girl Peter Parker, which is kind of creepy. It was a girl.
It is still creepy.
Yeah, it is creepy when they talk.
Yeah.
Anyway, but yeah, it's just been amazing, and it still rolls on. So we're gonna take a break, come back, we'll talk about where the book is at these days.
You can manage your entire Squarespace site on the go with the new Squarespace iPhone application. You can post and edit blog entries, upload pictures on the fly, manage content, save drafts, preview your updates, and access your site's stats. The Squarespace iPhone app has a completely custom user interface developed in-house to match your Squarespace site's look and feel completely. It's also the only iPhone application on any major publishing platform that contains an iPhone native statistics interface, tightly integrating your phone, your site, and your data. Snap photos on your phone and quickly post them to your blog, or easily draft blog posts directly from your Post tab. All of your current tags and categories will be there. All of your posts will be accessible directly from your Manage tab. You can edit drafts, delete posts, and preview posts with ease. Double-check your work before you click Publish with the app's Preview tab. You can now view your Squarespace site statistics right from your application's Statistics tab. Unique visits, page views, popular search terms, RSS subscribers, and top refers are all included. Your Accounts tab allows you to manage content for multiple Squarespace sites. You can save a draft post for one site and then easily jump to another site to schedule a post for later in the day. All of this and more is available now with Squarespace.
Stan Lee and Jack Kirby set the standard for the run with Fantastic Four. I think it was like 108 issues or something.
Around there.
Yeah, around there. And when Mark Bagley and Bendis began approaching that number, that was a big deal. It was a big deal. And not only did they approach it, they blew it out of the water and just sped right past it. But predictably, after nearly 10 years, by the 120s, I forget the exact issue number, Mark Bagley was like, I'm done. It might have had to do with the big bag of money DC had, but
and A, that's a fine choice to make.
Exactly.
B, he'd also been drawing Amazing Spider-Man before that.
Right.
Most of the 90s he was drawing it.
So
if you're going to be spending 19 hours a day drawing, maybe you want to switch it up a bit.
So it was kind of a big deal that Bagley was leaving. Would the book lose a step? Would the identity of a change? Stuart Immonen became the new penciler in a great handoff issue. Remember that handoff issue where it started off Bagley and ended Immonen?
Yeah.
A different kind of style. but still, Bendis was the linchpin that kept it, the keystone that kept it, the tone going. That didn't last too long.
He immediately went to New Avengers.
Exactly. And the whole Ultimate Universe went through a reboot with the Ultimatum event, the big tidal wave in New York City. Really didn't affect Ultimate Spider-Man at all, other than it just started at #1 again.
It didn't.
Yeah,
because when they came back at #1, most of the stuff was like, yeah, the world ended, but we're cool now.
Yeah, we're cool. Yeah.
We cleaned up Queens. Go. And I feel like
that's the best way to handle
that was
it.
so the best way. And there was a lot of people who were upset about that being left behind.
Yeah.
But that's the classic reboot. When you reboot, you go clean. You don't dwell on the past. The point is to go forward.
And I think that's the best choice, because I don't want this book to languish in post-apocalyptic world.
But none of the Ultimate books did. The whole point of the Ultimatum reboot was the whole point of any reboot is to start over and not to dwell. The whole point is to sever and go forward.
But what's the best thing about the reboot was that issue #1 got a new regular artist, David LaFuente, who had done Ultimate Spider-Man Annual #2. And Ultimate Spider-Man, I forgot to mention, the annuals are a huge part of the storylines. Like normally annuals are throwaways. With Ultimate Spider-Man, big things have always happened in the annuals.
And Bendis has had a habit of doing that. New Avengers annuals matter too.
True, yeah. But so LaFuente does one of the annuals, and so when Immonen moved off to go to New Avengers, LaFuente stepped right up. And if you ask me, better than Bagley did at the time. LaFuente's style represents a modern, younger. His style's got a lot of speed lines, a lot of energy. Peter looks like a kid,
but But still, it's not manga.
It's not manga.
It's got elements of it, and it definitely feels more modern. But it's important to note it's not like a manga style, which people freak out about. If you actually think about one thing Spider-Man has had, Ultimate Spider-Man through the whole run, is sort of artistic debate.
Yes.
There's a lot of people that don't like Bagley.
Yep.
And that was always one of the knocks on. I like Bagley. I've always liked Bagley.
You weren't a big fan. You thought he was
I don't
flat.
love him. I think he does. I think he does a good job. I mean, the thing is, every book came out on time, which is really a huge deal.
Too.
His storytelling is good. I think at times it felt a little flat to me. I mean, personally, I thought Immonen was fantastic.
Yes.
I could have gone with Immonen for a very long time. I thought he did everything that Bagley did really well, but just took it to another place that was personally for me a lot more appealing.
Yeah.
And in a way, LaFuente, Immonen was a fairly smooth transition. It was not jarring for people who'd been reading it, but LaFuente is a shift in direction.
He's polarizing, and I think almost more so than Bagley is. So that's one thing that's interesting about this book. It's been so important and popular for so many years, but it's also been had pockets of people that really are vocally against it.
The thing about it, for me personally, for now, is that I read it, and I mainly read it for Bendis. Bagley was all right. I enjoyed it, but I was never, oh my god. With every issue that LaFuente's done, has been an oh my god. Has been a did you see that 2-page spread? Did you see that panel? Did you see that? And it gives such an energy to the book that I think the book needs.
I felt like the book got a kick in the pants when he came out. I think even with Immonen, you could feel it sort of trailing. I think we hadn't really talked about it much in the last couple of years, and it had been going consistently, but it hadn't really been blowing us away. But then it started over. LaFuente was like an injection of adrenaline to the book.
Yeah, the only thing, Peter needs a haircut.
But that's consistent.
That's consistent. Yeah,
although
he looks like a girl.
The style that LaFuente uses tends to exaggerate a little more. He really looks like it. Like his bangs are really, really long. So
he's got that weird short hair, long in the front, like early '90s
He's got an anti-mullet.
Yeah, it's really.
He looks like Kate Gosselin. And that's a problem.
But that's the only criticism I can think of LaFuente's art.
And should do a seminal the haircut issue.
I can't believe we brought her up on the show. I would like to apologize.
That's your fault.
You did it.
That's all you.
Made you laugh.
Issue 200, the haircut.
But the thing, please don't make it go to 200 issues to wait for that haircut. And if he gets a haircut, it's because of us.
Or the Sentry dies.
But Bendis at the same time, like I don't want to distract from what his writing is still top. This is the best thing he writes. I think the one I'm most favorite for. Most recently we've seen a lot of Iceman come back. We've seen Johnny Storm. We've seen he's building this world.
He's created a really interesting cast of characters, and it's not just Peter. He's got a whole cast going.
Well, if you look at his work and the other Marvel stuff that's going on, he's been juggling through events for a few years now.
Yep.
Some of his own making, some of his own things, and if you don't like that, then that's all you've been getting from him. This is a book where it's just been the book, and it's him working with these characters, and you've thrown a lot of stuff at Peter, but we use the word consistent, and that's the thing about this book is that you can count on it. It's like German trains.
Yeah, and the thing is that Marvel's made a little bit of a big deal this past year of 10 years of Bendis at Marvel, and they put out a book 10 years of Bendis, and he did this great run in Daredevil, and he's been doing stuff in New Avengers. But if you ask me, this is the book that represents Bendis at Marvel for the past 10 years. This is the one book he's been on for all 10 years, and if you ask me, this is the one that he probably should be remembered remembered for.
Yes.
And I'm sure there's a future. I mean,
It doesn't seem to be an end in sight.
No, he's got, from what we've heard him talking, we've interviewed him, other people have interviewed him, he's got notebooks of stories. Like, he can keep telling Spider-Man stories for as long as he wants.
You can tell he loves Spider-Man to the point where he took over New Avengers, or Avengers. The Spider-Man in that book was really Ultimate Spider-Man and not the one that was happening in the Amazing books.
Yeah.
And really, that was what was going on.
Yeah.
Because he can, and because that's the better character. I feel like this book rekindled my love of Spider-Man as a character. It really, because I dropped off of Amazing Spider-Man at that point when they came out, and
I wasn't buying Amazing Spider-Man for years.
Yeah.
I only recently started.
Yeah. So this is the character that really made me. Oh yeah, I do love Spider-Man.
Yeah, he's great. So, I mean, if you've never read Spider-Man and be curious, too much of a history, even though now there's like 20 trades of Ultimate Spider-Man.
The book with no history now
The
has
thing
10
is,
years of history.
the thing is, you can go to Volume 1 Ultimate Spider-Man and start from there and enjoy it and and have 10 years worth of reading ahead
or
of you.
the new #1 that came out last year, you can start there. Or you can just really start at the beginning of any arc.
Yeah,
and just
that's
go
what's
from
so
there.
great is that they're contained arcs, and all you know Spider-Man, you know everything you need to know about it. Just
You know.
Yeah.
Come on.
You're fine. You're good, right? Come on.
So-
Spider-Man, Peter Porker.
So if you have any,
Peter Porker, he was Spider-Ham.
yeah, Peter Porker.
Porker.
So if you have any questions about Spider-Man or Bendis or Bagley or any of the Ultimate Spider-Man stuff, you can email us at contact@ifanboy.com.
And you can go to iFanboy.com. There'll be discussion about Ultimate Spider-Man there. This show there, you can be able to find links to all these books at the store at iFanboy.com.
You can get Mo vidges at revision3.com/ifanboy. Here's my question.
Yeah.
How does he get to Queens?
We've talked about this.
debated
We
that.
debated this. It's the subway. He rides on top of the subway.
The Long Island Railroad.
The Long Island Railroad. That's what it was. Yeah, it was the
Yeah.
Long Island Railroad. Yeah.
He rides on top of the Long Island Railroad.
How does he get out to Forest Hills? There's no buildings.
Well, the Long Island Railroad goes through Forest Hills.
Yeah.
So he's just on there?
Yeah.
When I lived there, it would go behind my
Suit-
house.
Is his suit insulated?
Well,
He sews it. Mary Jane sews it.
Right.
Ah,
Gore-Tex?
Gore-Tex.
They should put Gore-Tex in that thing.
it's waterproof. It just rolls right off. It's like those khaki pants.
Like a duck.
It's helpful in the flood. Stupid flood. Yeah, I wasn't settled too.
Settle.
Not huge. Okay. All right. 3, 2.